Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to part two of series one of Iron Wave Productions Craft Beer Series. So, as we talked about last week, we are doing 5 craft beers from all over the Tri County region of Nova Scotia. Last week we did Roofhound in Digby. Super, super good. And I hope some of you are going to go there this weekend, next weekend, any weekend you can, or even an evening for a drink and a bite to eat. Tremendous place, great, great vibe, and you see all about it in the previous video. If you haven't watched it yet, go do that, and then get yourself to Roofhound, for sure. This week, we're going in the opposite direction. We're coming down to Yarmouth, where we are located here at Iron Wave Productions, and we're going to talk about a beer, a brewery, and a restaurant that I like very, very much, and that I think a lot of people in Yarmouth know, but maybe some people outside the region don't. Today we are talking about Rudders. Now, Rudders has quite a history, very different than Roofhound or even any of the other breweries we're doing in this series, because Rudders is the oldest. So, officially speaking, to get into its history, we have to go back. In 1996, the Queen Molly was opened and was making craft beer, the only craft beer place down here at the time. In 2000, Rudders opened up under their current brand here, and they have been working ever since, so we're talking about 18 years now. So where is it, first of all? Downtown, right on the wharf. Go all the way down. You come down, you'll see a big yellow building, for those of you who don't know. If you're ever in Yarmouth, if you ever come up here, my American listeners, or even my Western Canadian listeners, if you ever come down this way, you can't miss it. It's right on the water. It's a gigantic yellow building. They like yellow because they branded their growler with it. Incidentally, the only of the 5 that brands with a non-white brand. So that's where we're going to start. Let's talk about the building itself. So the building is over 150 years old. And it's by far, I mean, the brewery's not that old, but the building itself is very, very old. It's very rustic. Has a very seafaring mariners kind of pirate kind of aesthetic going on there. You go in there, they've got all kinds of stuff on the walls. They've got tremendous, tremendous atmosphere. Rudders beer. Here's a growler, because we love these things. Much like last week, we do have a bit of a write-up we can talk about. So I read you a bottle last week, and I'm going to read you another one. So this is Rudders Brewery, ales and lagers. And we talked about ales. Up until very recently, Rudders did have a lager, which we will talk about as well, because it was really good. And if anybody at Rudders sees this, please bring it back. It was so yummy, and I hope that we get more lager in the future. But Rudders Brewery, ales and lagers. So Blonde Rock, 5% alcohol. Rudders Red, 5%. Yarmouth Town Brown, 5%. Raspberry Blonde, 5%. So you see that there's a bit of a theme here. If you're going to notice some of the other breweries, the alcoholic content varies a lot. And in this case, it's very, very specific. And it speaks to its history. It speaks to the amount of time and the amount of I think if you look at the way that they brew there versus the way they brew in some other places, they've had the experience. They've had the years of maturity to get this to the point where you can really see kind of what's going on. To speak more to them, they do have a specialty option under Raspberry Blonde, which is blank, which you can kind of see there. You get a bit of a look at that. And so they do have other beers aside from their basic staple ones. And we're going to talk about a couple of those too in a little bit. But to quote them here, we pride ourselves in brewing handcrafted, full-bodied craft beers. Our high-quality ales are served unfiltered and contain no adjuncts or preservatives. For maximum enjoyment, this all-natural beer should be consumed within 48 hours. Please rinse your bottle for refilling. Keep refrigerated. Made in Nova Scotia, Canada. What a great, basic, straightforward read and add. You could easily put that on a 30-second radio. This kind of thing is made for selling. Now, in saying that, talking about the brewery, we have to talk a little bit about the brewmaster. And this is where I'm going to call out Mike Ferguson. So Mike is incredible at what he does. He is creative and he loves beer and he loves the craft element of it. Um, I've gotten to see Mike in his element a couple of times, and he's always just he's zoomed right in. And I'm really excited to go down to the brewery in a few weeks and chat with them and see what they're doing, do the tour, get it out there. Let's kind of see because a lot of people with Rudders, because all the other breweries are within a year or two of each other, they're all relatively new in this area. People sometimes forget that Rudders is a brewery. If you'll notice here on the glass, get kind of close there, it's a seafood restaurant and brew pub. So they haven't quite marketed themselves the same way. The restaurant has been pushed a little harder, I think, than the brewery has. And I've always thought that was kind of sad because the beer is excellent. The beer is really good, um, and really brings out to me some of the qualities of beer that you don't get right away. You need time to, oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. And I think that Mike and the crew in there really get that, and they're very passionate about it. And I'm very excited to see him and to see their brewery on this channel within the next 4 or 5 weeks. I think we're up to now. You can get it in growlers. You can also get it in kegs. I have tried, sampled all of them on the back of this guy. So all of the main ones, the Blonde Rock, for instance, very indicative of I think a traditional ale, and it kind of not really a pale ale. It's not super hoppy or anything, but it does have a certain um, very easy drinking quality. We talk about Rutter's Red. Well, red beer is probably, in my opinion, some of the easiest beer to drink, no matter where you get it from. And Rutter's has a really smooth quality about it. The red is really, it's a little sweeter than maybe some reds that you've had. So if you want to pair it with, red usually goes with darker meat or these kinds of things, or even just on its own. Um, Yarmouth Town Brown. So there's a story about Yarmouth Town Brown. I came down here in 2006, and actually I came down here in 2005 originally, but I moved here in 2006. And Rudders was the only brewery, the only local brewery at the time here. So I went down to see about the local craft. And when we walked in there, yeah, it's got a beautiful bar up front, and they got a nice deck on the side overlooking the ocean. It's like, oh wow, jeez, I guess they're doing something pretty cool here. But we got into the beers, and anybody who knows me at all knows that my absolute favorite beer in the world has always been and will always be stout beer. Nice, dark, chocolatey, rich, full. You don't want to drink 10 of them. You just have a one or maybe two, and you really enjoy it. That's what I like about craft beer in general is that you take your time with it. But this Town Brown, I had the first sip and I went, hmm, not so sure. I wasn't sure because it wasn't like the stout that I'd had. I've drank a lot of Irish stout in my life, and kind of that style. And this was a little. It felt different than that to me, and not just because it wasn't. Obviously, it wasn't the beer I'd had before, but it grew on me. And I had another one that night because we were there staying there for a while, and then I bought a growler of the stuff, and it's kind of been a bit of a go-to for me ever since. Um, and I would say kind of that was the reaction I had to a few Rudders beers. The first time I had them, it was like, huh, okay, there's something. I wasn't quite ready to, oh wow, and I wasn't quite, it's like, hmm. But sitting with them, they absolutely make some of the best beer uh, anywhere. Two others I want to talk about. Killam's Irish Ale, I would describe as it definitely has a red quality, but it doesn't taste like a red. It has a really bitter finish that I absolutely love. It's different. It's definitely one of the best beers they make, and I actually discovered it within the last year or so. And like I said, I've been here for 12, so it's different. It's not what you might consider to be the first beer anybody reaches for, but it might be the last one because it's really good, and I'm so glad that they're continuing it. So they have one other beer that I wanted to talk about, even though it's not currently on their menu. I'm really hoping it comes back at some point in some capacity, even if they have to rename it. Um, and that, of course, is the Old Lightkeeper's Lager. So, story behind this one too, for anybody who doesn't know, there was a movie um, called The Lighthouse that was made here, and it was made here very recently. We had Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. They were both here, and they did a movie down to the Cape Fortune Lighthouse. They built another lighthouse next to it so they could use it, because our lighthouse is a little bit modern looking, and I think they wanted something very old. And Rudders, being the company that they are and is connected to this community as they are, developed a lager called the Old Lightkeeper's Lager, which actually, to me, was very unusual because usually when you go to these craft breweries, you're always drinking ale. And I love ale, don't get me wrong, ale's great. But this was different. Lager, oh, Lightkeeper's Lager. Okay. So I looked at it and I went in and tried it and immediately went, oh, I mean, I'd love a good lager too. And lager is different, it has a different process making lager than ale, and it seems to me it takes longer. I really, really, really like that beer. And, I've talked to a lot of people who drink Rutter's beer, and it's interesting. Everybody's got, a different opinion, and this one's kind of good, and I don't really like that one. Nobody didn't like that lager that tried it. Even people who are like, I don't drink lager, try it, and they, oh. So, again, Mike, if you're listening, or if you see this video, that, oh, wow. Just wow. That's the kind of thing that I think we need more of, is the kind of, like, that was a home run. And what a beautiful, beautiful beer that was. Just complete finish. It didn't die off. It didn't, some beer you kind of, oh, no, it wasn't like that. It was like, oh, the whole way through. That's what it was like. So please bring that or something. If you can't brand it that way, that's okay. You can call it anything you want. But please, please bring the lager back. This is an example of why Rudders is such a good brewery, because they've got that experience. They can take chances. They've got a triple berry stout right now, which is very unusual. But people love it, or they had one called Sweet Georgia Brown, which was relatively new. So even though they have a history of making beer and recipes that go back quite a ways, they're also not afraid to experiment. They're not afraid to reach out and say, we can still do this. We're still modern enough to keep up with the new kids on the block, so to speak. If you ever go, um, my advice would be, definitely get yourself some food, because the food is great. But ask your server while you're there about the beer. Ask them to talk about pairing it with one. If you have fish, lots of seafood, it's a seafood restaurant. A lighter beer, a lighter ale, is probably a lovely pairing. Or if you have something maybe like a steak, maybe you want more of a red, or maybe more of a brown, or get a flight, try them all, and if you don't find something you like, I will be shocked, because they've got so many different things going on, and again, quality control is just so good there. Overall impressions of Rudder's Seafood Restaurant and Brew Pub: food is great, consistent tasting beer, very confident. It is so they know what they're doing, and they're more than happy to share that with you. They're more than happy to share their beer and their food and their knowledge. Um, I feel very comfortable whenever I walk in there. There's always people that are flying around with serving trays and beers, and it's amazing how deft everybody is, just kind of moving around and going all over the place, and it's really, really fantastic stuff. But because we're talking about the beer is confident, and it's smooth, and it's absolutely, it's so traditional. It very much like if you were in England, or if you were in some other parts in Eastern Canada here, or even in the Eastern U.S., where they really focus on the English style. So it's not big, heavy, punch in the head kind of beer. It's smooth. It's easy to drink. Even the heavy stuff is easy to drink. Um, they've got a really great selection. They've got a very good variance in what they do. Um, Well-established staff are really great, really friendly. Mike knows as much about beer as anybody I've ever met, so definitely a good guy to talk to if you're interested at all in the process or in beer itself. So it's definitely a place that I like seeing people in. And actually, just as a side note, Iron Wave Studio isn't far physically from Rudders, so I do go there relatively frequently myself, and love it. Love the beer, love the food, love the people, and you got to go. So make sure you go down, check it out. have some food, have a few drinks, take one of these beautiful, very unique growlers home, and make sure you go back and try them all. So we've done part two of series one of the Tri-County region of Nova Scotia's craft breweries. We've done Rudders today. It's been great. Got to go try some beer. I'll probably have one after work. And next week, we will be talking about Heritage, which is definitely among the newest in the area. So we're going to go the other way and talk about a brewery that's kind of being born and, learning as it goes and has some absolutely stunning beers. You will absolutely be blown away by what they're doing, because I know I am. This has been Iron Wave Matthew. This is Iron Wave Productions. Take care. We'll see you soon.